Welcome back to History for Sleep. Tonight, we're not following the loud moments of history. Not the battles that shook cities, or the rulers whose names echoed through centuries. Instead, we're listening for something much quieter. The changes that arrived slowly. The ideas that spread without announcements. The revolutions that happened so silently that the people living through them barely noticed at all. These were the transformations that shaped how humans live today. How we organize our days. How we work. How we trade. How we believe. How we understand authority, time, ownership, and even ourselves. They didn't arrive with force. They arrived through habit. Through repetition. Through small decisions made again and again until they became normal. Long before written history, human life followed a simple rhythm. People moved with the seasons. They followed animals, weather, and water. Home was temporary. Possessions were few. Survival depended on flexibility. Then, slowly, something changed. In certain places, food became predictable. Rivers flooded reliably. Plants could be grown and stored. And without ever intending to start a revolution, some humans stayed. At first, these settlements were fragile. A bad harvest could mean disaster. Disease spread more easily. Life often became harder, not easier. But staying in one place created something new. Surplus. Extra food. Extra tools. Extra time. And surplus quietly reshaped human relationships. Someone had to manage it. Someone had to decide who received what. Someone had to protect it. These roles didn't feel like power at first. They felt like responsibility. But over time, responsibility hardened into authority. And authority, once established, rarely disappears. This was one of humanity's first silent revolutions. The shift from equality based on mobility to hierarchy based on control. No one voted for it. No one planned it. It simply worked well enough to survive. As settlements grew, memory became a problem. Who owed what? Who worked when? Which fields belonged to whom? The human mind was no longer enough. And so, marks were made. Lines in clay. Symbols scratched into stone. Writing was born not to tell stories, but to count. This changed everything. Once information could exist outside the human mind, it could outlive individuals. Agreements became permanent. Rules became fixed. Authority no longer depended on persuasion alone, but on records. What was written felt unquestionable even when it was unfair. Law followed naturally. Not justice as we imagine it today, but predictability. If punishment was known, behavior could be controlled. If rules were written, leaders could claim neutrality. The system itself became the authority. People obeyed not because someone was watching, but because disobedience felt impossible. Over generations, humans adapted to these structures. Children were born into them. Customs solidified. Traditions replaced choices. What once felt temporary became inevitable. Time itself was reshaped. Ancient societies began dividing days, months, and years. Not for convenience, but for coordination. Planting, harvesting, rituals, labor. Those who understood the cycles of the sky gained influence. Calendars became tools of power. To control time was to control society's rhythm. Belief systems evolved alongside these changes. Religion did not arrive fully formed. It absorbed older ideas, local spirits, and natural explanations. It provided meaning but also stability. Rulers ruled not only by force but by perceived cosmic order. Questioning authority became equivalent to questioning the universe itself. Some knowledge was shared freely. Other knowledge was guarded. Literacy was limited. Sacred languages were complex. Symbols were layered. Whether intentional or not, this created distance between those who understood the system and those who lived within it. Control through mystery proved remarkably effective. Trade expanded these silent revolutions further. As goods traveled, ideas traveled with them. Techniques blended. Beliefs merged. Languages borrowed. No one noticed the world becoming connected. It simply felt larger than familiar. Technology advanced quietly too. Most ancient inventions were not sudden breakthroughs but refinements. Each generation improved slightly on the last. Progress felt invisible. Only centuries later did the difference become clear. Ancient people did not imagine a radically different future. Time felt cyclical. What had been would return. This belief encouraged patience. Why rush change if the world repeats itself? And yet, change never stopped. Family structures shifted. Social roles evolved. Childhood itself was redefined. These changes were lived, not debated. They slipped into daily life unnoticed. Even collapse followed this pattern. Civilizations rarely fell suddenly. Systems weakened. Trust eroded. Infrastructure decayed. People adapted long before historians named the fall. To those living through it, life simply narrowed. And still, the silent revolutions continued. Modern life rests on these ancient foundations. Our schedules, our paperwork, our institutions, our expectations, all shaped by changes that were never announced. Perhaps the most unsettling thought is this: we may be living through silent revolutions right now, adjusting to systems we didn't choose, accepting changes we barely notice, adapting because adaptation feels easier than resistance. History teaches us that the most powerful transformations do not arrive loudly. They arrive quietly. They wait. And by the time they are noticed, they have already changed everything. As these quiet systems settled into place, something else began to change just as slowly: the way humans understood power itself. In early communities, leadership was often temporary and practical. Someone led because they were experienced, respected, or simply available. But as societies grew more complex, power became less about ability and more about position. Titles emerged. Roles became inherited. Authority outlived the individual who first held it. This shift happened without resistance because it felt natural. Children grew up seeing power attached to certain families, certain symbols, certain spaces. What is familiar rarely feels unjust. Architecture reinforced this idea. Large buildings did more than serve practical purposes. They reminded people, silently and constantly, of who controlled resources and labor. Temples, palaces, and administrative centers did not need guards to intimidate. Their scale alone conveyed permanence. Stone does not argue. It endures. Over time, people began to organize their identities around these structures. Occupations passed from parent to child. Social positions hardened. Mobility became limited not by force, but by expectation. A person was born into a place in the world, and most accepted it without question. This was not oppression as a sudden act, but as a slow narrowing of possibility. Knowledge followed a similar path. Early understanding was shared through storytelling and demonstration. But as societies expanded, information became specialized. Craftsmen guarded techniques. Priests guarded rituals. Scribes guarded writing. Each group justified this separation as necessary. Expertise, once isolated, becomes authority. There is a theory that ancient societies understood something fundamental about human psychology: that people resist sudden change but accept gradual transformation. By altering daily routines just slightly, generation after generation, entire worldviews could be reshaped without conflict. Whether this was intentional or simply an emergent property of large systems remains debated. Technology reinforced these changes rather than disrupting them. New tools were introduced carefully, often framed as restorations of tradition rather than innovations. A new method was described as the old way rediscovered. This preserved stability while allowing progress. Even moral values shifted this way. Concepts of right and wrong were not fixed. They adapted to economic needs, population size, and resource availability. What was once taboo became normal. What was once sacred became symbolic. These changes were rarely argued. They were absorbed. One of the quietest revolutions occurred in how humans related to nature. Early societies saw themselves as part of the natural world. Over time, they began to see nature as something to manage, predict, and eventually control. Rivers were redirected. Forests were cleared. Animals were domesticated. Each step felt practical. Together, they transformed the human relationship with the planet. Some ancient texts hint at awareness of this shift. Stories of golden ages, lost harmony, or fallen worlds may reflect early recognition that something had changed. Whether myth or memory, these narratives suggest unease beneath progress. As systems grew more complex, individuals grew smaller within them. Responsibility became fragmented. No single person caused harm, but harm could still occur. This diffusion of responsibility made systems resilient, but also indifferent. Suffering could exist without intention. Yet people adapted. Humans always do. They found meaning in routine, comfort in predictability, identity in role. These adaptations allowed societies to persist for centuries, even millennia. The quiet revolutions worked because they aligned with human nature, our desire for stability, belonging, and explanation. Modern life is not an exception to this pattern. It is its continuation. We live within systems so familiar that imagining alternatives feels unrealistic. Changes occur incrementally, each one small enough to accept, each one shaping behavior just slightly. History suggests that when change feels invisible, it is usually at its most powerful. And so the past is not distant. It is present, embedded in habits, expectations, and structures we rarely question. As the night deepens, allow this realization to settle gently. You are part of a long, unbroken chain of adaptation. A witness to changes that may one day be called revolutionary, even if they feel ordinary now. As societies matured within these quiet structures, the human mind itself began to adapt. Not biologically but culturally. Ways of thinking were shaped by environment, routine, and expectation. What people believed was possible slowly narrowed or expanded based on what their society allowed them to see. In small communities, everyone understood the system. In large ones, understanding became partial. Most people knew only their role. This was not ignorance but efficiency. Complex systems require most participants to trust that someone else understands the whole. This trust was rarely questioned. It was reinforced through education, ritual, and repetition. Stories taught children where they belonged. Customs taught them what to expect. Deviating from these patterns felt uncomfortable, even dangerous. Conformity became a form of safety. Language played a quiet but powerful role. Words did not just describe reality, they shaped it. As vocabulary expanded, certain ideas became easier to express, while others faded. Concepts that lacked words were difficult to imagine. Over time, language guided thought itself. Some ancient languages encoded hierarchy directly into grammar. Others emphasized relationship, obligation, or duty. These linguistic structures subtly trained the mind, generation after generation, to view the world in particular ways. This was not deliberate manipulation. It was inheritance. Education, where it existed, reinforced existing systems. Knowledge was framed not as something to question, but something to preserve. Innovation was acceptable only when it did not threaten stability. Curiosity survived, but within boundaries. There are theories that some ancient cultures reached moments of profound insight, only to retreat from them. That certain ideas were considered dangerous. That knowledge, once discovered, was deliberately obscured or mythologized to prevent misuse. Evidence is fragmentary and interpretation varies. But the pattern of selective preservation is undeniable. Even memory itself was shaped. Oral traditions emphasized what mattered most to survival and cohesion. What was remembered became important. What was forgotten disappeared entirely. History was not recorded impartially. It was curated. This curation did not require deception. It required selection. Every society chooses which stories to tell. Over time, those stories become truth. As trade networks expanded, these curated worldviews collided. Ideas that once felt universal were revealed to be local. This created tension but also possibility. Some societies adapted, others resisted. The ones that survived longest often blended old structures with new influences, slowly, carefully. The pace of change remained deliberate. Too much disruption risked collapse. Too little risked stagnation. Successful societies learned to adjust without drawing attention to the adjustment itself. There is a quiet irony here. The civilizations that endured were not the most advanced or the most powerful, but the most adaptable. Their revolutions succeeded because they did not feel revolutionary. Modern psychology reflects this ancient wisdom. Humans resist sudden change but accept gradual shifts. We normalize what we experience repeatedly. Over time, even profound transformation feels ordinary. This is how the past continues to shape the present. Not through events but through patterns. Not through force but through familiarity. As you rest, consider how many parts of your life feel natural simply because they have always been there. How many rules you follow without remembering when you learned them. How many assumptions you carry without knowing their origin. These are the quiet gifts of ancient societies. Systems built not to inspire but to endure. Creativity did not disappear inside these ancient systems. It learned how to survive. Rather than challenging structures openly, it adapted, working within accepted forms. Art, music, architecture, and storytelling became safe places to explore new ideas without threatening stability. Patterns repeated with subtle variations. Motifs evolved slowly. A design changed slightly here, a symbol shifted there. Over generations, these small changes accumulated into entirely new styles, while still feeling familiar enough to be accepted. Innovation disguised itself as tradition. This balance between expression and restraint shaped the limits of imagination. People learned what could be imagined safely and what could not. Ideas outside those boundaries were often framed as myths, dreams, or messages from the divine. This allowed exploration without accountability. Dangerous thoughts could exist as long as they were not claimed as human invention. Some historians suggest that ancient myths were not merely stories, but containers for complex ideas. Knowledge wrapped in narrative to preserve it across time without exposing it directly. Whether this was intentional encoding or cultural coincidence remains debated, but the result is striking. Many myths contain insights into astronomy, psychology, and social structure that would not be formally studied for millennia. Innovation also occurred through necessity. When environments changed, societies adapted quietly. Tools were modified, crops were replaced, trade routes shifted. Each adaptation felt like survival, not progress. Yet collectively, these adjustments propelled humanity forward. Even failure contributed to these silent revolutions. Collapsed societies left behind lessons. Others observed, copied what worked, avoided what did not. Knowledge traveled through absence as much as presence. Ruin spoke without words. As populations grew, individuality became both more limited and more abstract. Most people mattered less to the system, yet the idea of the individual began to emerge philosophically. This tension shaped ethics, religion, and later political thought. Ancient societies planted the seeds of ideas they could not fully realize. Time continued to move slowly in the human mind. Generational thinking dominated. People planned for children they would never meet. Buildings were constructed to last centuries. Actions were judged by continuity rather than speed. This perspective created resilience, but also resistance to rapid change. Some conspiratorial theories suggest that advanced knowledge existed in ancient times and was lost or suppressed. While evidence is limited, it is true that many technologies and techniques were rediscovered rather than invented anew. This suggests cycles of forgetting and remembering rather than linear progress. Whether knowledge was lost intentionally or through collapse, the effect was the same. Each generation believed it was starting from near zero, unaware of how much had already been known. This illusion of novelty persists today. Through all of this, the quiet revolutions continued to reshape the human experience. Not by altering what people did each day, but by altering what felt possible, acceptable, and inevitable. As the night deepens, allow these thoughts to drift without effort. History does not rush. It unfolds. It repeats. It adapts. And you are part of that unfolding just as countless others were before you. In the modern world, the echoes of these ancient patterns are everywhere, though they are rarely recognized as such. The structures that guide daily life feel new, efficient, even inevitable, yet their logic is deeply old. Schedules divide time. Institutions define roles. Systems reward compliance and discourage disruption. None of this arrived suddenly. It accumulated quietly across generations. What changed most dramatically was not what people did, but how they understood themselves within these systems. Identity shifted from being rooted in kin and place to being shaped by function. People became known for what they did rather than who they were. This was not imposed by decree. It emerged naturally as societies grew too large for personal familiarity. With this shift came a subtle trade. Stability in exchange for anonymity. Predictability in exchange for autonomy. Most people accepted this exchange without resistance because it reduced uncertainty. Knowing one's place, even if limited, felt safer than navigating endless possibility. Information followed the same path. As knowledge expanded, no individual could hold it all. Specialization became necessary. Experts emerged. Trust replaced understanding. This was efficient, but it created distance between people and the systems that govern them. When systems fail, they often do so invisibly, until the consequences are unavoidable. Some thinkers argue that this distance is the defining feature of modern life. We live inside structures we did not design, guided by rules we did not write, shaped by assumptions we rarely examine. Yet this condition is not unique to our time. It is the culmination of ancient adjustments made for survival and order. Even rebellion follows ancient patterns. Revolutions that succeed often do so not by destroying systems, but by replacing them quietly. New norms are introduced gradually. Language changes first. Values shift next. Behavior follows. By the time resistance forms, the change is already complete. This is why the most influential revolutions are often recognized only in hindsight. At the time, they feel like minor adjustments, small compromises, practical solutions. Only later do they reveal their full impact. Technology accelerates this process but does not fundamentally alter it. Tools change faster than values, but values still change slowly. The human mind adapts at the pace it always has. Gradually. Reluctantly. Habitually. Ancient societies understood this intuitively. They built systems that felt timeless even as they evolved. Modern societies do the same, though the pace has increased. What feels permanent today may be transitional tomorrow, but it will not feel that way while we live within it. As you rest, consider how many aspects of your life feel natural simply because they are familiar. How many routines you follow without remembering when they began. How many beliefs feel obvious until they are questioned. These are the silent revolutions at work. Not dramatic, not visible, but persistent. History does not move in straight lines. It drifts. It loops. It settles into patterns that feel stable until they no longer are. And when change finally becomes visible, it often feels sudden, even though it has been unfolding quietly all along. Allow that thought to soften as you rest. There is no need to resolve it. History does not demand conclusions. It offers perspective. And in that perspective we find calm. Living inside history means rarely recognizing it as history at all. From within, events feel ordinary. Adjustments feel reasonable. Change feels incremental. It is only later, when patterns are traced backward, that meaning emerges. This has always been true. Ancient people did not believe they were shaping the foundations of the future. They were solving today's problems with the tools they had. What makes silent revolutions so enduring is their ability to feel invisible. They do not ask for belief. They do not require loyalty. They simply ask for participation. And participation, once habitual, becomes identity. Over time, humans learn to measure themselves against systems rather than against one another. Productivity replaced presence. Efficiency replaced ritual. Progress replaced continuity. These values did not arrive as enemies of older ways. They arrived as solutions. And solutions are rarely questioned. Even memory adapted. The past became something stored externally in records, archives, and objects. This freed the mind, but it also weakened personal connection to history. Stories once carried through generations became facts written down, detached from emotion. History gained accuracy but lost intimacy. There is a quiet cost to this trade. When people feel disconnected from the past, they also feel disconnected from the future. Time becomes fragmented. Moments feel isolated. Ancient societies, for all their limitations, often experienced time as a flowing whole. Past, present, and future were connected through ritual and story. Some scholars suggest this shift altered human perception itself. That modern anxiety is not simply a product of complexity, but of disconnection. A sense of living inside systems too large to feel human, shaped by forces too abstract to understand. Whether or not this theory is true, it echoes ancient warnings. Many early texts speak of imbalance, of forgetting origins, of losing harmony. These were not predictions but reflections, observations of change already underway. Yet humanity has always adapted. Each era believes itself uniquely overwhelmed, yet continues forward. People find meaning in smaller circles, in relationships, in creativity, in reflection. These too are quiet revolutions happening within the individual. As you rest now, you are doing something ancient, stepping out of urgency, allowing thought to slow, letting perspective widen. This act itself connects you to countless others across time who paused, reflected, and wondered. History is not only something that happened, it is something that is happening, and something that will continue to happen, shaped by choices both large and small. The most powerful changes may already be unfolding, unnoticed, in habits forming today. And that realization does not need to be unsettling. It can be calming. Change does not always arrive as chaos. Often, it arrives as quiet continuity. So as the night settles, let these thoughts drift without urgency. There is nothing to solve, nothing to decide. Only a long human story, unfolding softly, moment by moment. And for now, it is enough to rest within it.